Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at a PDK dragon list that I've thrown together. I thought I really want to play some PDK and I want to really use Water of Orca because I really enjoy that card and I think it's a wonderful one to have. So really wanted to give that a go. So I threw this together with the idea being that you're predominantly looking for the Prime Dragon Keeper build. So you're mainly looking to play that out, combo it with a bunch of cards and get as much off as you can. At the same time, I did include one Lindworm as a potential finisher. I haven't had to use it yet, but it's in there just in case you do, and I think that's good. Having one big finisher that you can use is really nice. It can save you from a tight spot, or it can put lethal on board very, very easily, so why not? I've also got one Zenithra. I think that's fine. Any more than this I think would be awkward for the deck because it'd be a dead card and harder to use. As just a one-of, I think it does its job quite nicely and can also combo well with PDK if you already have that on board and you want to get some stuff out. Of course, following that up, we've basically got everything normal for a dragon deck, including a couple of the newer cards that we've used in a previous dragon deck because they're pretty good staples and I think that's how we'll see them. Of course, ramp isn't everything to this deck, but it definitely does help, which is why we've included 2 Aeas and 3 Dragon Oracles, along with some other nice cards. One to deal with Sword really effectively, Force of Dragon Unit does that job nicely, along with the nice pickups off the Prime Dragon Keeper, also help out nicely. Star Phoenix, Infinite Regeneration, especially with Moon and Sun. Those 2 cards together will create infinite cycles of cards, provided neither of them are banished, which works out really nicely, and Moon and Sun helps us get our Lindworm proc, which works out really well for this deck, so we'll get right into it and check it out. So our first matchup is against Forest. Forest has presented itself with very little in this expansion, I think. Overall, I think it's going to take a while for it to really find its place. I think at the moment, still one of the strongest decks would be Beauty and the Beast Forest, for Forest decks that is, not overall. And other than that, I think Sword really keeps it in check quite nicely, which makes it hard for it to really shine in this current meta. But they still give you a good run when it comes to being aggressive. They can really put out a lot of followers very quickly, and that is something you've got to keep an eye on and be aware of, which is why having this clear in our hand early is going to be super good against Forest. So of course the early Happy Pig, not really any kind of threat against me yet. And I find that Dragon Africanado, I don't know, stupid pronunciations, is completely fine here. It presents a nice little board. They do go for the trade though, which picks up quite nicely in the end. I was a little worried it wasn't going to trade well, but it did the job for me, which is always nice. I also decided to go face and throw a Water Orca. I want to get that onto board and just build up our spell plays, and since we have a second one in hand already, I'm not too worried about holding those unless we already had a PDK in hand. So they go for their second Happy Pig along with their 1/1, looking to trade this time round though.
Fairies, don't push yourselves too hard.
And of course, Star Phoenix is actually a really good draw. We can use this as a trade and then use Water of Orca if we want to, and put another Star Phoenix back in our hand, or just hold off. I mean, Water of Orca next turn is going to get a huge buff due to the fact that we can just play out a bunch of Orcas for 6. Or even better yet, we get Dragon Sword, giving us a ramp, which will put us onto 8 for our Water of Orca turn when we need it.
I won't let you harm Mr. Dragon.
Of course, I don't really get to do much else because they did have an ambush and can't really use trade at this point.
Hey, let's play. Hey, let's play. Hey, let's play.
And they flood the board with fairies and a buff, so this is basically spending everything decent from their hand. They are going to get a nice chunk of damage with this Emperor, but we're going to clear all of this out fairly easily. I mean, Dragoon Scyther plus board clear, really, really effective way to do things. And we can just go 4 to face, plus the 2 from the spell. Go for a nice 6 damage this turn. It's probably going to be hard for them to make a comeback from a big wide sweep like that.
Hey, let's play. Hey, let's play. Atoms of Steel, heed my call. Still room for improvement.
But they're not doing too bad. They have swarmed the board again, which is pretty impressive. but I can remove at least 2 things from this board this turn easily, while also getting my Sybil up. Do decide not to trade into anything and keep the Evolve instead. Probably more beneficial that way, plus the healing really negates anything they have on board. So even with a double buff, it would be really difficult to do any big amounts of damage. Airbound Barrage though is a pretty nice way to do things, although I think they're only left with fairies now. Nope, Beetle Warrior. Okay, so a couple of fairies and a Beetle Warrior. That is a nice bit of damage. 6 to my face is a little dangerous, but nothing I shouldn't be able to handle. And Prime Dragonkeeper, perfect. If I could get really good pings off this, I would be happy. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to quite go that way. We only get triple Orca, but we do get our Star Phoenix back. So unless they draw into some removal next turn, it's going to be hard to get rid of this Dragonkeeper.
Care to touch?
See, I would have preferred that ping to have hit the Beetle Warrior and then Evolve Clear, but honestly, this works out just fine. It does have to leave up the 3-1, but they are now under legitimate lethal threat at this point in the game. And a Water Fairy is really not going to be much help. So we're still sitting in a really good spot right now.
Care to touch?
We get our ping, we can go face for a good amount of damage. And our Dragon Oracle gives us at least a draw. I'm trying to think on what would really win them the game, and at this point I don't think anything would work too well, other than Jungle Warden actually. Jungle Warden would have been a legitimate threat, but fortunately we didn't see anything like that come down. So, what would be considered the top deck of the current meta, Sword,
This one's for my
with win rates somewhere in like the 58% range or something, higher than what Neutral Blood was at least according to the stats collected by Shadowlog, if you want to take those stats reliably. Personally, I don't much, but at the moment, it's pretty clear to see that Sword is definitely one of the top 3 decks quite easily. I would say it's getting close between Portal Haven and probably Shadow, Reanimate mostly, being one of the top few decks up there with it. Sword's biggest weak point is going to be board clears, so I think as more decks start to get the hang of that, their win rate will definitely come down. This first week was always a rough one for classes, and I'm sure with what we're seeing now, it's going to decline more and more over the coming weeks.
Romeo, I'm coming to you.
So, not too concerned at all being able to just get out a nice Tsukiyomi. It presents a nice counter to this 1-3 and really sets us up nicely.
To the depths of the abyss. The darkness doesn't end.
Because we already have our Prime Dragonkeeper, which is ideal. And they just basically pass the turn, giving me a free turn to get some setup and ramp in.
He's still no match for Mr.
Which is
Dragon.
pretty much perfect at this point.
Be gone.
We are hoping to be able to save our board clear until they go for something like Arthur. You really want a board clear on those Arthur turns, or used as your lethal potential turn. They're kind of the only points against Sword that I'd be happy to use those. This sort of match can be quite close from what I've been testing with PDK so far. So go for the 7-drop Amaterasu. It gives us both heal and presents a strong 5-5 to the board, while also boosting our potential win condition for the end of the game if we need it. Of course, they get out their 6-drop, or enhanced 6, sorry, which gives them Bane and Protection. Quite a strong card, but not really strong enough to survive a Prime Dragonkeeper. And since we haven't seen them play their Fatal Bullet player card, I forgot what it's called now, the one that gives them Fatal Bullet, I don't think we're too concerned by removal on this 1-3. And even if we are, I mean, we're going to get plenty of damage this turn and force them to try and find removal next turn.
It won't be long now.
So it was definitely worth the play. I mean, we got a total of 8 damage and removed 2 followers. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out.
Flash, in the name of glory.
They do go for the Arthur play, which on 7 is pretty normal. The only real problem here is that buff makes it really hard for my clear to work effectively.
Draw your swords.
So it is going to be a difficult one to work around, but I don't see it as impossible. So I decided to go for the Water of Orca turn instead of going for my board clear. It just wouldn't have been effective enough. Even if I had played Orca straight after, we still would have had a hard time hitting everything effectively.
Care to touch?
All we need is one hit on that 5/5 to really get a good turn.
You wouldn't.
Because now we have a full board of Orcas that need to be dealt with. So being able to trade just one of those with the Evolve is worthwhile. We're also not quite on Lindworm territory yet either. I think we're up 5 or 6, which means we'd still have to have a few more turns before we actually got any good advantage out of that. But we should hopefully close the game before that turn.
Her Royal Majesty is impatient.
So they are going to be pushing hard with these.
Try getting past me.
Getting rid of my Orcas, not too surprising. Even a Lancer coming down to remove one. And trying to defend themselves as best they can. So this is a really awkward lethal. I took a bit to actually think this one up. I'm able to actually ping everything on their board using this method and actually deal 3 damage through pings while setting up my 1 damage 1/3.
Someday we'll soar together.
It took me a little bit to think about just because I had to think of my play point cost and the best way to go about it. But it ended up working out exactly how I wanted, so I was very impressed by going for that lethal. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this PDK deck. I'm sure there's ways to improve this deck. After all, I did just put it together myself and had no real structure to it at all other than my previous experience playing PDK and messing around with it. But it was a lot of fun. It seems to do quite well. It can have a pretty solid matchup against pretty much every deck so far that I've versed with it. And that, for me, is what I like in a deck. I like to be able to have some fun and at least be reasonably competitive on ladder. And that's the most fun that I can possibly have with it. So hopefully you guys did enjoy the deck. Be sure to check the deck list out in the description below. Hit that like button and subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.